Hi, my name is Ray Owens. I'm with the Square Dance Check. This is Charlie Petrea, and this is going to be a kind of reverse on Charlie's Square Dance Callers Talking videos here, the series. A few weeks ago, I had the wild idea. I said, hey, you know what, Charlie, let's put you under the spotlight and see you answer the questions that you've been asking the callers and everything. We're here at the 48th Caller Lab Convention outside of Reno, Nevada, in Sparks, Nevada right now. Charlie, you just flew in. Everything went okay?
Yeah, it went quite well, yes, sir.
Good, all right. Well, I got a whole bunch of questions to ask you, so we'll just get started here and take the interviews that go. So, one of the interviews that I watched, I think it was the one with Teresa Berger. You mentioned that you learned to dance nearly 30 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about it. Tell me about getting started. What led you to do that?
My wife and I started when my son was 3. So it's 29 years ago now. Her parents were dancers, and I'd never even heard of square dancing. Unlike a lot of the stories you hear, I didn't square dance when I was in grade school, like some people tell that story. But my in-laws were dancers for a few years, and they said, hey, why don't you come take a lesson with us? And so we did. We had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, a 3-year-old at the time. And so we took lessons. Turns out we took lessons, and I didn't know who he was at the time, and he was just starting out. But Tim Mariner out of South Carolina taught us to dance. And so we danced for about 6 years and out of Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. And then, of course, when my son was about, 8, 9, 10, we quit dancing just because we had so much going on with him. And to bring that whole thing full circle, when he graduated high school, we hadn't danced in years. He graduated high school, went to Georgia Southern College, and 2 months after he was gone, my wife and I were sitting on the sofa just watching TV, and she looked at me and she said, I'm not going to stare at you for the rest of our lives on this sofa. And I said, okay, because I did so much with my son coaching and everything, baseball, that we were always busy. We weren't at home. And my wife was out doing stuff with us. And so I said, go find a square dance club, out of the blue. And we were living in Atlanta at this point.
So, no, not let's go ballroom dance, let's go square dance.
Yeah, I told her, I said, see if there's a square dance. And of course, this was, I can't remember what year it was now. It was probably around 2008 or 9. And so what little internet we had then, she found a club that was 2 miles from us that was starting lessons, because I knew we had to take lessons. So we took lessons and started back in, and within a year we were full-blown 5 nights a week dancing here and there. And then around 2010, 2011 is when I got the bright idea I was going to be a caller, and so that's where we are.
All right. One thing that always fascinates me about square dancers in general, not just callers, but in all square dancers, is what they do in their real lives and everything. Hunter Keller he's in the funeral industry.
Yes.
Travis Cook is a database administrator for this huge healthcare conglomerate. Ted Lazat works for an insurance company and everything. So tell me, what do you do in your secret identity?
Okay. What I call it is in the real world. When I talk to people, and I was like, well, I got to work in the real world. I'm a police officer. I started in law enforcement in '88 and in Savannah, and worked with the sheriff's office in Savannah. Worked there for 9 years. Decided I wanted to be a baseball coach in high school, so I quit work. Went back to school. That didn't work out. Within 2 years, I was back. We had moved to Atlanta at the time, and I ended up going back to work for Cobb County Police Department, and I've been with them since 2000, and I can retire in about 14 months.
Oh, I bet you have some stories.
A lot of police stuff. I've done everything with the sheriff's office when I was a kid. I was 20 when I got hired on. I worked in the jail for 2 years, and I worked the road and the courts and all that stuff with the sheriff's office in Savannah, and that was in the early mid-90s. And then when we moved to Atlanta in '99, by 2000, I'd gotten on with the police department, and that's where we actually answer calls and do traffic stuff and whatever police-wise. So, and I worked the road for 14, almost 15 years with Cobb. Spent a little time in detectives, didn't like sitting in a cubicle. And so I went back to the road. Now I work out of headquarters, just doing whatever, and I've got about 13 months left.
What's the scariest situation you ever been in a cop? I'm assuming you've been shot at.
Yes, that was in Savannah. I haven't been shot at in Cobb. Years and years ago in Savannah, we answered a burglary. When I was with the sheriff's office, I answered a burglary call with a Chatham County police officer. Me and I had a partner riding with me that time. So we saw him go by with lights and sirens on, and we were like, hey, let's see what he's doing, because we were just out serving paperwork. That's what the sheriff's office did at the time, what I was doing. So we follow him down the road, and he turns in toward this little trailer back in the woods. And so I just turned in behind him. Had no idea. I didn't know where we were going to. I just knew we were going. And right as I come out of the car and my partner comes out of the car, we see a guy come running around the trailer with a shotgun, just blasting. And so all three of us went under our cars as he went running by. So we popped back up, take off, chase him through the woods. Since it wasn't even our call, we're calling on the radio saying shots fired, all that. And so people came from everywhere. I don't know what the end story is because it was a police issue. We had to go and talk. Of course, I didn't shoot at anybody or anything like that. But so that was the closest call I've ever had.
Wow.
Gun-wise.
Yeah.
But I've always been fortunate. I don't know if it's I put myself in good situations or it's just I've been fortunate because I've had friends of mine that do the same work as me, and they've gotten injured or whatever. I've just kind of avoided it. So.
When I was a kid, I lived in Memphis, and I saw an advertisement, a full-page advertisement run by the police, the Memphis Police Association, and they were angling for a pay raise. It had been some time since they'd had a pay raise. And the ad said, you wouldn't put your life on a line for $1 million, and our cops do it every day for a whole lot less.
Yeah.
And I went, man, that's a good ad.
Yeah.
That's a good ad. All right, so you're at the Academy Awards for Square Dancers, and you have just been named Square Dance Caller of the Year.
Okay.
So who's on your I got to thank these people list?
Okay. Well, I'd have to thank a gentleman named Ray Monty. He's passed away, but I would definitely bring his name up. He is the gentleman that around 2011, 2012, I talked to and said, I want to learn to square dance. And he said, okay, I'll send you some modules. So definitely Ray. But then outside of that, I've got a lot of recent ones. I'm trying to think of some in the very beginning.
Your wife.
Yep, absolutely. My wife does. She's the one that organizes everything that I do. I wouldn't have made reservations here. I wouldn't know how. So she does all of my travel scheduling and everything else. A gentleman named Randy Ramsey. He is a caller out of Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and North Georgia. He was the guy who taught me to dance when we started back after my son was in college. And Randy is another one. Randy was good about, every time I would go to his club, he'd call me up and say, hey, I want you to go up and do something. I'd say, okay. So I'd have stuff written down in my pocket. I'd pull it out and I'd go up there, and he's like, hey, hang on a second. Let me see what you're gonna call. And I said, okay. So he'd take the paper, he'd wad it up, stick it in his back pocket, and he was like, go after it,
dude.
And so I was like, Randy, come on, man, I want to do it. So he really pushed me. Randy Ramsey meant a lot for me. Most recently, a friend of mine, we go way back, Sean Butler. We started at the same time, but he's really helped me, and we talk every Sunday. We call it the Sunday Sermon. Huh. I call him every Sunday morning and ask him how his weekend was, square dance calling, and he talks to me, and we go back and forth. Of course, the Tony Oxendines of the world, he produced the first record that I ever did last year. And so Tony, Ted, all those guys have been a huge influence on me.
That's actually how I knew about you, was when I did your video for the TOTL Productions and everything. And but in going back and looking at pictures, like last year in Evansville at the GSI Caller School thing, what endeared me to you then, although I didn't know it, it was you. Was everybody else is hugging Scott Bennett, you're hugging Sherry Pladdies.
That's right, I remember that now. Yep, when we were going shaking hands, yep.
Yeah, you said, "Oh, the hell with this! I'm going to hug Sherry."
That is correct. Yep. Oh gosh, that was good times. Yep, I remember that. And I love the work you did on the video.
Well,
for that was phenomenal.
What you had the advantage that you had a whole bunch of clips from your dances and stuff.
Yeah.
And so many people didn't have that stuff when I made the videos. I'm like, what the hell am I? I'm gonna just make up a story, I guess.
When I started, I got into YouTube stuff, putting videos up of me calling and everything, and so I really enjoy that. And so it's fortunate. I like to go back now. Not that I'm a great caller by any means, but I'll go back and listen to my patter from 2014, 2015. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh.
Why are people still dancing?
Well, I love some of these videos that I do. I look at the early stuff going, oh dear God, just turn that off, yeah. All right, in a couple of your interviews, you mentioned just being starstruck and seeing different people at conventions and stuff. So tell me about your most fanboyish encounter.
Since I didn't even consider myself a caller, and I had talked to him about this on the interview I did with him, and it comes out this Friday. Several years back, I was probably a year or two into trying to learn to call, and Hunter Keller came to Kennesaw, and I had heard of Hunter Keller, and when I saw that guy come in, and he was up there, and he had all the square dance, he had the shirt on and everything. And he did an Elvis song, I think. And when the song was over, it was an ovation. The dancers just clapped and clapped and clapped. It was amazing. And so I got to talk to him for a minute, and I'm like, hey, you're Hunter Keller. And he's like, yeah. So, I mean, and of course, I'm much older than him. And so that was my first, just like a fanboy. I was like, oh, Hunter Keller. But then, name-wise, the first time I met Tony Oxendine, everybody knows Tony. He's top of the game. And I met Tony, and what I tell everybody is when I started doing my podcast, it was because I meet all these people and you're just blown away, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, they're just regular people, men and women. And so, I had the opportunity a while back. We were on a road trip, and I got to ride with Tony and Ted Lizotte for about 2 hours, and it was just the talking back and forth. And I was like, I'm sitting in the back seat of, Randy Travis and George Strait, sitting here in the front seat, so I'm just blown away by that. So, but caller-wise, I mean, everybody I meet, like on a national level, I'm just blown away just how nice they are, and forthcoming and talking to you. And like I joke that at some point you got to tell them, I'm good. You don't have to tell me anymore, because hey, you call me if you have any questions. You call me, and I'm like, okay. And I do appreciate it, but it's just so super helpful, bunch of guys. But so Tony Oxendine, probably the biggest, but Hunter Keller was the first time I was like, oh my God, that's Hunter Keller.
That's great. What levels do you personally dance at?
I dance mainstream and plus. I've taken advanced lessons from beginning to end twice, and but in Atlanta, there's really only one club that dances advanced, Hotlanta, and I don't get over there very often, and so I couldn't dance it. Yeah, I couldn't dance 30 seconds of it right now. And that's where I call to also. At some point, I'd like to go back to advanced and trying to kind of get into that. But currently, I'm happy at mainstream and plus. I feel pretty comfortable in there.
In both dancing and calling.
Yeah, dancing and calling. And I think too, it's the caller that if somebody says that they're bored with something, or I don't do mainstream, I only do plus. Why? If you've got a good caller that's creative and good at what they're doing, mainstream can be just as challenging as anything, So mainstream and plus.
And I'd say the same thing about SSD. There's a lot of clubs in Columbus going, yeah, we don't want to dumb it down. Well, if you have the right caller,
yes,
I mean, it can blow you away.
That is true.
With basic calls and everything, just absolutely blow you away. We were at Caller Lab last year, and Mike Seastrom got up and did a tip of SSD and had us turned every which way but loose. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean it has a lot to do with the caller, for sure. Because I mean, you could get in there with somebody doing advanced and be bored doing that.
Yes,
absolutely. It's just so it's a lot on the caller's shoulders. It's a big responsibility once you start to think about it, you get people in there and they're going to either like you or dislike you or just not have any feelings one way or the other. So that's why I try and work at just variety, body flow, get things moving. And that's where when I go to all these schools, body flow and hand usage and stuff like that. And so, any level, I think it's the weight's on the caller of whether it's fun or not.
I agree. Yeah. And as long as you keep foremost in your mind that I'm here to entertain, then you'll do a good job. Absolutely. Okay. All right. I have this down because you ask everybody in all of your interviews, what's your favorite call?
My favorite call is Relay the Deucey.
Why is that?
Relay the Deucey because I love to dance it, first of all, and there are a handful of calls that are the same beats and steps per, but when I call Relay the Deucey, it gives me, when I'm just sighting, I'll go into a dance with some modules in my head and some planned stuff in my head, and then I bang through that, and when I get to where, all right, let me just sight now that I know who couples are after 2 or 3 tips, and I know some of the dancers if it's at a club that I've never been to, I call Relay the Deucey, and it gives me that 2 to 3 seconds that I can be like, all right, where am I going to go here? And then I go from there. So I get to stand back and watch them dance, and it's fun. I like circular motions, and so when I call Relay the Deucey, I get kind of hypnotized for a second, and then I get right back into it. So.
In your interview that you had with Justin Russell, he mentioned calling at the C1 level, and he said that calling C1 just really wasn't for him, that it was a lot of cookie-cutter vanilla stuff and everything. And you were just talking about calling mainstream and plus. Is there one you like over the other, or you just like to mix them both up and have at it?
I like to call mainstream more than plus because mainstream makes me think more, because in my mind it's a lot quicker with the calls, whereas like I was saying, when I get into plus I can say load the boat and I can just stand back and wait a few seconds, and then I get done with that and call, all right, spin chain and exchange the gears, and you just step back and let them dance. It's fun for the dancers because they're just dancing, they don't have to listen to you for a couple of seconds. But I like to call mainstream because it keeps me on my toes. And I'm like, pass through, trade by, touch a quarter, scoot back, boy, run, girl, and pass through and wheel and deal. And so I'm just constantly thinking, what's next? Where am I going? Where do I want to get to? So I like to call mainstream.
Now, in Central Ohio, we don't have any mainstream clubs at all. They're all plus.
Are they?
With one except our dance club,
okay.
There's that. But they're all plus and all. So are the clubs in Central Georgia, are they more mainstream than plus?
They're all of them, with the exception again of Hotlanta. Hotlanta dances up into the C's, but the handful of clubs that are around me are all mainstream and plus, alternating tips, and they do that. We did have an all plus club at one time, but after some of their dancers for what they passed away or quit coming or whatever, to get more people to come in, I think they went to a mainstream and plus. They're heavy plus, there'll be more plus, but so every club there's mainstream and plus for the most part, except for Hotlanta, they will have advanced and C tips on occasion, depending on the caller. When I call for Hotlanta, obviously I usually split it with somebody who can call advanced, and they do the advanced stuff.
Oh, interesting.
But all the clubs I think we've got 7 or 8 active clubs in my 30-mile radius in Atlanta, and it's all mainstream plus alternating.
All right. A minute ago when you were talking about that it kept you more mentally stimulated is not the right word, but it makes you more challenging for you to call on the mainstream level. There's been a couple times that I've been to the GSI Caller School, and I've watched, Jerry Story comes to mind. One of the classes he was teaching, he was telling the student callers, okay, you can't call this, and you can't call this, and you can't call this. Is that something in a similar mindset? If you know that you have limited your plus calls, that you've got to explain or relay the deuce or something like that. Is that more of what you're going for? Self-limiting what you're calling there?
No, I mean it is a little bit limiting because you don't have the amount of calls as you do in plus. But I think for me it's just the time it takes, the beats per minute, the steps in mainstream. The calls seem shorter because once you get into the plus, some of your calls take a few seconds, and it's fun, but I like to call. And it takes away from the patter sometimes, I think, but I love to hear myself. And so that's why even in my singing calls, I have to every now and then just go, let the music play, let the music play, let the music play. Because I was talking to Scott Bennett and Ted Lazat and some of the music guys and Tony and all them. And like Scott, some of his music that he puts out, the music is better than me singing by a huge stretch. So, he'll get into a middle break and I'm like side space grand square, and I have to I'll just stand there and let the music play and let them dance in his Alabama. So but when I do mainstream, it's a whole lot of me touching quarters and split circulate, blah blah blah. And so I think that's why I like the mainstream. I don't try and limit myself. What I started doing is I don't write anything down, but I have a little set list at every dance that I do. And I will, like on the first tip, I'll put focus on, what did I do just night before last? Focused on split circulate. And so I would do split circulate from different positions. And then in the third tip, which is because I do mainstream plus for most of the clubs, it was separate. Just do separate from different positions. And that way I don't forget, because if I don't write it down, I'll go in there and I'll use 5 calls the entire tip. And I'm just like, I've got to get more variety. So I do that. I do it with plus too. I'll get in there and I'll realize that I haven't called any diamonds through my plus. And so I'll put in my little tip on the second tip, I'm like, focus on diamonds. And so I'll call and I'll do all my track twos and everything else, but I'm like, get on the diamonds, get them in diamond position. And so in my head, so I'm constantly talking on the microphone and in my head where to go next. So
all right. Tell me about the hardest aspect of learning how to call.
The hardest aspect for me was being okay with failing, because I want to get up, like when I go to the schools and they say, all right, Charlie, go up there, get your microphone, and whatever the drill is, what we're doing. I'm focused so hard on finding the corner, getting there. So to me, it's the hardest aspect of learning it is just the confidence to go up there and not do it perfect every time. Go up there with a focal point. Hey, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this. And when Ken Ratucci says, all right, Charlie, resolve, I don't stop for a second and go, okay, ladies trade. Now ladies circulate one spot. Because that's the goal, and Ken does that to me constantly. I wouldn't be surprised if he walked into a dance in the middle of Georgia one night and go, hey, Charlie, resolve for me. And I'd be, So the hardest aspect, well, let me tell you, on a different track completely, the hardest aspect of learning to call for me is, before I had a club, getting the opportunity to call. Because you cannot call sitting on your sofa.
No.
I did it for the first 10 years, because I didn't have a club. I would go do tips here and there, but you can only get so much. When I go in on a tip, don't want to go in there and work out things in my head. Now that I have a club, I call every first and third Thursday in Calhoun, Georgia. And so I can go in there, and yes, it's a club dance, but I'm also practicing things. I'm like, hey, let's do some more separate stuff. And so I go in there, and so I'm working my dancers, but I'm also working out stuff in my head. So the next time I come in, it's just second nature. So I think the hardest thing about learning to call is the repetition, getting to do it.
Yeah, the over and over again. Yeah, it's not like any of us ever picked up spin chain and exchanged gears in the first 30 times we did it.
I will. Well, unless you've called, and so the dancers. Learning to dance at different levels is tough, but learning to call it takes a strong soul to get up there and just keep going. And you look out there, there's people and you're just like, I have no idea how to get to the corner. I don't see it. So I guess learning to fail and repetition is the hardest parts for me.
Right, but nobody's going to hold it against you if you make a mistake behind the mic. You know that, right?
See, the thing is, I know that, and I danced for years, and I never thought to myself, "Well, I don't want to dance to that guy." Well, maybe every now and then.
There's a few.
Yeah, there's a couple, but it wasn't because of the calling sometimes. Yeah. But that being said, and it's the same thing. It's almost when the dance is over. If I missed the corner twice in the night or 3 times in the night, nobody remembers that.
No.
But I do. I go home and I'm just like, ugh.
Everybody's always hardest on themselves.
Why didn't I put red shirt down? Why did I put white dress? I didn't know.
So, is there a particular dance or situation, event that would come up that would just make you really nervous, as cat in a room of long tail rockers or something? Or if somebody said, hey, come do this thing, and you would go, holy cow.
Up until about last year, the one night parties of non-square dancers who say, hey, we want a square dance, that really frightened me, because as much as I love calling and all that, I'm not comfortable with telling. When I go to a square dance, people are there to square dance. And so when I get up there, that first tip, I'm like, all right, let's square it up. And people come up and they start getting in squares. And the thought of doing it at the one night parties, I'm just like, man, how do I get people to get up and do that? I've done 3 or 4 now in the past year. And they're some of the most fun things I do now. Because the people there really want to, and that's what they have you there for. But just frightened is when I go up. Like if they ask me to go up tonight or during Caller Lab, I just go up there and do a singing call. I got 15 songs in my head right now I could do right now without music, just because I do them so much and I know them. But if they said, hey, go up there and do your favorite, go do Troubadour, Charlie, you recorded that, go do that, I would be so scared, just because that's all callers sitting out. And they're not critiquing me, but in my mind they are. And at some point, Ken Ratucci is going to say resolve for me, Charlie.
In every job I've ever had, I've always been an instructor in one mode or another. And that was always my mental attitude. As long as I knew that I knew more than anybody in that room, I was good. But if there was somebody who was my peer or better, oh God, I would just, no, I can't do this.
I mean, I've called on, now I've called at several national conventions and state conventions. So to say go up and do a tip, and I'm prepared for it, sure, I'll go up. And I wouldn't be, if we did that, you probably remember it. We did that little bridge dance in Atlanta.
Yeah. I was the guy in the crane.
Yeah.
That was me.
I remember that. Yep. And so, but that was just so much fun to me, but there was no nerves. I mean, we had 700-800 people out there.
Yeah.
But I was doing singing calls, man. That's easy for me. So yeah, the number of people do not frighten me anymore, where it used to, but now it does not. It's who's in the crowd.
Yeah.
is what frightens me, because it's peers, and once you get peers, you're just like, oh.
Well, I think last year at the Caller Lab thing, we got caught in a crossfire because the callers are all going, yeah, once we put this down, they're great, yeah. So tell me about the best calling experience you ever had. One at the end of the night, you kind of went, boy, that rocked. I really knocked that one out of the park.
I know I bring them up quite often, or I have today for sure. About 4 years ago, I was still struggling to get my patter right where I wanted it and everything. I did a dance at Hotlanta Squares in Atlanta, and my patter, it just when I was done with the night, I was like, man, that's the best patter I've ever done. I say I sighted everything. It was all in my head, but I could also see everybody. And it was just like everything was in slow motion, like they talk about in sports. When I was up there calling, I was just like, I see everything.
Wow.
And the calling, all my singing calls felt great. What does help is, again, Hotlanta dances up into the seas. So there was a couple times, one of my buddies that was there, we were doing plus, and he said, when I got done, I said, how'd that sound? And he said, that was great. He goes, I can't believe you did relay the deucey from half sachet positions. And I was like, I didn't do that. And he said, yes, you did. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, you did. But the thing is, since they can all dance both positions, and they dance, I called it, and it didn't, and I fixed it without even knowing it. And I was like, well, if I'd have done that at any other floor in Atlanta, I'd have had 4 or 5 squares just staring at me. You can't do that. And I was like, well, you can. But that whole night, probably did 7 tips, and it was just, up until now, that one stands out to me as the best night I ever had.
Nice. All right. So we're going to do the other side. What's the worst calling experience you ever had? What's one of those that you just kind of put your tail between your legs?
Every dance prior to Hotlanta that night? Oh, no. Gosh, there were several times. It wouldn't be for a whole night. I feel like all the dances I've done since I've started doing dances, and it's been about 7 years. I've been doing my own dances now, 7 or 8 years. I felt really good about most of them. I've had some tips in Kennesaw where I was starting out that were just atrocious. The patter, I mean, I don't know how many times I'd say, just square your sets, just square your sets. And they all knew I was starting, so they laughed it off for the most part. I will say this, and this one sticks out in my head. I'm really happy with some of the singing calls that I pick out for myself. I feel like I can sing in the country genre, not in the 80s rock where I try to sing, but I can't.
That question's actually coming up next.
Okay.
We'll get
Several years ago, a lot of years ago, I did, what is the song, Jump in the Line?
Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
Jump in the Line. It's from Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
I thought and I had it, this is so long ago I was using that record, and I put it on at Kennesaw, and I thought, boy, I'm going to tear this floor up. And about a quarter into the song, I was like, this is absolutely atrocious. This is terrible. But I finished the song. What I will say, too, when I was starting out, my wife came and danced to all the dances. I would go up and do tips, and I would come down to her. My wife is brutally honest with me when it comes to calling for this, and I'll come down and I'll say, how was that? Because I can't hear it all the times. And I said, how did that sound? And she said, you were a little off key. And I'm like, okay. So I'll go back, or I'll come down and she's like, you were off key until the first pattern, and then you kind of found where you were. So I came down from that, and she said, don't ever do that song again, ever. And I was, okay, so I've never done, I don't even know where happened to that record. But, so
skeet practice when you're right.
So that was the worst pricing call I've ever done in my life.
In your interview with Scott Bennett, y'all spent a lot of time talking about music, in particular adapting popular music to square dancing. Right? You brought up at the Atlanta convention that you were calling "Simple Man" by Leonard Skinner. So tell me about in your repertoire of the music that you like to use. What are some of your favorite popular music inspired songs to do?
When I first started out calling, when I first started out dancing back in 2009, 2010, you know, I didn't know about all the new music that was starting to come out. And so Ray Monty, the guy that taught me to dance, one night he did George Strait's Unwound, one of my favorite songs in my life. And I was like, whoa, what is this? I know this song. You know, it was a song that I knew. And so then when I got into calling, I started listening to everything. So, and when Leonard Skinner, growing up in South Georgia, you know, that was some of my influences, was 80s rock and Southern rock and things like that, and country. But I really loved it. If somebody just said, hey, go do a singing call for me, I would pull out Simple Man in a second. I love that song. And like I was telling Scott, he introduced me. He just happened to be the MC. And I could see him off on the side kind of dancing and doing it with me. And I was like, man, I got this thing. Because I felt like I just drilled it. It sounded good to me. And so I love Simple Man. I really love Looking Glass's Brandy.
Yes.
Probably my favorite song just to do for if somebody's never seen me before. I can't really do it in my clubs anymore because they're all like, what's this, Brandy again? Like, yep, it's damn right it is. And I'll tell you another one that I really love is Jim Croce's Have to Say I Love You in a Song. Everybody knows that song when I pull that out, even if they've never heard me do the version of it, the square dance version. I'm a huge Jim Croce fan, and so
Operator has to be my favorite song of all time.
Yes, it is. That is a fantastic song. But I stumbled onto that Jim Croce song, Have to Say I Love You in a Song, 3 years ago, and I was just like, oh, this is what I close with.
Oh, nice.
You know, so if I hit a club that I've never been to before, I haven't been there in 6, 8, 10 months, that'll be somewhere in the end, because that's something that one thing several callers have told me. They said, regardless of how your night goes, do something that some of the people will go home singing as they walk out the door. And so I'll end with a Brandy, or I'll end with Have to Say I Love You in the Song, something like that. I won't end with Sonora, by the way, is the name of that song.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So what's on your list of songs that haven't made the jump yet, that you haven't found a square dance version?
There's a couple that I'd love to make into square dance songs, and I just haven't had the opportunity. I'm a big Sturgill Simpson fan. If anybody knows who Sturgill Simpson is, if you're really deep into country, you would. He's got several songs that I would love to do. Pop wise, I don't know, because I don't delve much into that anymore. But gosh, you got me on that one. I don't know.
Well, that's all right. You don't have to answer all of it.
No. I've never thought about that, but
questions are going to get harder.
Okay, but to have an answer, because I hate to leave things unanswered. Sturgill Simpson's Long White Line.
I know how to edit videos,
okay.
Right?
Sturgill Simpson's Long White Lines. I absolutely love that song.
Why? Tell me why. Tell me why you like it. Is it the beat? Is it the music? The words?
It's country. It's his voice is older country type voice. I'm not familiar with this individual. In the frame of a George Jones kind of voice, yes. Yeah, it's a George Jones style that he sings. He's not super mainstream by any means, because a lot of his songs have some profanity in them on occasion. But Long White Lines does not. Just if you get the time, I just love that song. And I actually floated that last year with Tony when we were talking about what song I was going to do. And he said, he said, give me 5 songs.
Right.
And so I found 5 songs. Another one I was going to do was The Race Is On, George Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, somebody did that, but it's been a really long time since somebody's done it. And so then I tossed out Troubadour, and he's like, hey, let's do that. And I was like, that seems too slow. But I didn't know about how to make square dance music. He's like, no, we can speed it up. It'll be fine. Mm-hmm. So that's where we went with that. He said because, too, George Strait is somebody that a caller is going to get on Music for Callers or whatever website you may or may not use and search for that person. Right. And so he said you might do better with a name like that, because I said Sturgill Simpson, Long White Lines, and he was like, I don't know who that is. Yeah. And which makes sense, but just the song itself is fantastic.
All right. Now, your club, do you teach? Do you do the lessons and stuff?
Yes. I had never taught a class before.
And how many classes have you taught today?
Well, I'm in my first one now. We're on lesson 8. The club wanted to do SSD. And I think we have 12 students now, and the club that I call for, they put me on as their caller in January. Is that they actually dance every Thursday night, and I call the first and third, and we've got another caller that calls on the second and fourth. Dan calls on the second and fourth, and so they said they wanted to do SSD, so they got students and everything, and so we. Every other week, and I call him and say, hey, this is what we covered. We go by the lesson plan. And so, I've had a lot of people, and again, square dancers and students, some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, depending on what groups you're in. And, they come up to me and like, wow, man, I really love the way you teach. And I was like, well, that's fantastic, because I just started 4 weeks ago. I really like the way you just taken to it. So I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. But another thing I've picked up from all the caller schools that I've gone to and everything is all of them would tell you, Charlie, you've got to teach a class. At some point, you've got to teach a class because you will learn more than they do. Yeah. And I'm starting to see that now. And so yeah, I'm in my first classes, and we're seven classes deep, and it's going quite well. I'm really enjoying it.
And so the 12 students you have, is that what you started with?
We started with 14.
Okay.
And at some point, I think 2 of them, for whatever reason, and I used to bring this up at the clubs that I would angel at and things like that during lessons. They go out and they recruit or find these people at parades or whatever, and I'm like, you might want to drop in on them. It's going to be, 4 to 5 months of classes. Hey, you want to learn square dance? I'm like, sure. Well, come on Tuesday night. And then when you walk in and you're like, all right, for the next 17 weeks, we're going to come here. And they're like, whoa, I don't want to do that. So we knew we would lose a couple. So we only lost 2. So I was pretty happy with that.
Nice. So your SSD class is going to run 17, 18 weeks?
No,
or so?
I don't know whatever the teaching plan is. I haven't looked how far it goes.
I've heard they were 10 to 14.
It's probably something around that. Yeah. We just kind of talked about it, and we said, let's do it this way, and it's worked out good. I see some of the benefits in the SSD stuff with the lesson plan has where you can start doing singing calls from the first night. So that's good. But I've also taken lessons from some callers when you're doing basic and mainstream up into plus, where they'll write their own singing stuff, so you can start doing singing calls. So I don't have a position one way or the other on the SSD or anything. That's what the club wanted to do. So I've always wanted to teach, so there we go. That's what I'll teach.
It is when your SSD students graduate, where are they going to dance?
They are going to dance with us, and I don't want to get too much into the politics. But,
I get it.
We decided that we would do the SSD, and when they're done with that, we'll teach them the remaining mainstream. So take that for what it is. Right. So, because that was our biggest conversation prior to teaching it was we were like, hey, let's why don't we just do mainstream? And the thing is, hey, let's less classes, 12, 14 weeks, whatever it is. And then when you're done, you can just teach on the mainstream. Okay. Again, I couldn't go back and go, in all my years of teaching, this is not going to work because I don't have that. So I was just like, hey, I want to teach a class. You're offering a class to me.
Yeah.
you want me to teach Latin? I'll teach Latin. It's not going to go too well.
Is your club planning on having multiple classes throughout the year then?
I have no idea.
All right.
I don't know what their plans are on that.
I was talking to Travis Cook after a dance not long ago, and he was talking about some of the different career directions he was considering. Teaching, more involvement in caller lab. So what's in the long view for you? Where do you see your calling career taking you? Especially since, a year and a half, you're going to retire.
Yes.
And assume, I hope, going to give you more free time.
Yep.
So tell me where you see this headed.
Of course, you never know how plans are going to work out. But what my plan is, when I am eligible to retire, I'll retire sometime next year, 2024. What I'd hope to do is I have a club now, and that goes on a yearly basis, and I have no plans on leaving. If they want me to continue into next year, I'll do that. But my wife and I plan on sometime end of 2024, going into 2025, moving to Florida. We love the Tampa area, so we'll probably end up on the Gulf Coast side of Florida, and I would love to just continue calling and travel and call and make each little weekend where just me and my wife, we either have a camper or plan was to get a boat and go around the Great Loop and just call and live on a boat for a while. So I don't know what the living arrangements will be, whether it be just a house, a boat, an RV, but I hope to just go around calling,
Nice.
have a regular club, but say next 2 weekends I'm going to be here and there, and because I just I've had so much fun calling, and the little bit that I've done compared to most. That's the other thing that going back to your talking, what the hardest part about learning is, I'm up there and I'm just like, man, I'm struggling, and I'll talk to whoever, and they're like, Charlie, I started doing this when I was 18. They've been doing it for 50 years, and they're like, you're 8 years into this, relax. And I'm like, nope, I need to be up there with you. So, but I would like to just full-time call. Once I retire, full-time call, and just see where it goes from there. If you want to say a bucket list, the only other thing I want to call in all 50 states. I'm at 9 right now, so I've got a little road ahead of me. But I want to call in all 50, and so we'll see.
Well, I guess that's where I was going to head with my next question was, when you do your traveling and stuff, will you concentrate in the South and Florida, or are you just playing? I'm gonna go everywhere.
I want to go all over. Like I say, my wife, she retired last year, and she's got a little part-time job now that she still goes to a couple times a week, and but she loves to travel. That's why it's easy for me to get her to come to these things. When it's a nice hotel and we're going to a place we haven't been before, if I say, hey, will you go up 50 miles up the road to my dance? She's like, nope, I'm not going. I hear you 6 nights a week in this house. I'm not going to go. So she really enjoys traveling, so that's a big part of it. That's why I want to go call in different places. Yeah. So I get to call and meet new people, and she gets to see something new. So that way we both get something out of it.
So speaking of your bucket list, where's the place that you are most desirous of going to call? I want to go call to Alaska or Hawaii or British Columbia. Have you got a bucket list destination?
I don't really. I mean, like I said, I want to call in all 50 states just to say I did. And this is odd, but Newfoundland, Canada. I don't even know how much square dancing is in Newfoundland, Canada, if any, because I've Googled it and I don't really find any. But all my mother's family are from Newfoundland, and I'd love to go back there. I've been there one time when I was 10, and I remember just being there. But I would love to go and call in Canada. So out of country, if you want to call it that, I would love to call in Canada. Yeah. And so,
well, it is out of country, so
it is. But I've been to Japan once, not to call. My son was in the Air Force, and he was in Misawa, Japan, which is northern Japan.
Yeah.
And so we went and spent about a week over there with him when he was in country over there. And beautiful. Love that place. But I don't think I'll ever have the money to fly first class. Yeah. There's no way I'm flying coach back to Japan. And it taught me a lesson, too. I was like, I'm never going to Australia.
Oh, my God, no. Oh, my God. I'd love to hang out with the New Zealand, but no.
Yeah, unless I could afford the first class where I get to sleep in the little cubicle, maybe. But,
keep playing those lottery tickets, man.
Other than that, if I go out of country, it's going to be Canada, maybe.
All right. Well, as I said in the intro thing, we're here at the 48th convention outside of Reno, so I'm going to put you on the hot seat here.
Okay.
All right? Is there, and this is a long question,
okay.
There's something that irritates you or frustrates you as a caller, and that you believe that you may not be alone in that there may be other callers that are frustrated, irritated by this, and that you think the executive committee, Buddy and Jack and Ted and all of them, would just get off their 3 martini lunches for a little while and listen to the rank and file. They could fix it. Is there something like that in your calling career?
Not that I can think of, and not to say, like I said, I don't have issue with if I see something that I think needs to be different, bringing it up to the executive committees and things like that. It's just, I don't know if it's part of growing up being a police officer. I just want to, have things go smoothly. I don't get involved with things that I don't feel like I have to. If I see something in square dancing that I just think, I don't have any opinions on it. I just like calling. So, when they get into this call needs to be plus, or this call needs to be advanced, or we need to redo this, I'm just like, just tell me what you want to do. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
As long as I'm still out there and the people that are dancing, that come to dances to dance to me or just come to square dance, and they're laughing, having fun, they don't care what level a call is.
Right.
If I never tell them, hey, they took Relay the Deucey out of plus, can't call that anymore, whatever, I just wouldn't tell them. They wouldn't know. So nothing's going to irritate me. I like to play. It's the Canadian part of me, I guess. I just want to play the center.
Live and let live.
I'm not going to upset anybody. I love all those guys too much. I wouldn't want to,
Oh gosh, no.
That's why I wouldn't want to be on like executive committees. They want me to make a decision. Like, no, not making a decision.
That's my next question. Did you have any interest in being further involved in Caller Lab, the board of governors, committees and stuff? Does that interest you?
Just recently, I started thinking about that, and I thought, once I'm retired, because a lot of people that I call friends and consider friends now, the Justin Russells of the world, of course Tony and Ted and those guys, but Justin's a young dude and he's super involved in Caller Lab. Mm-hmm. And in the conversations that I've had with him, and he said, yeah, I'm doing this and I got to do this next week, and I thought, man, I really need to get a little more involved with this. So yes, with it probably next year, I'd like to explore something that I would be interested in. If it's a focus group when it comes to like mainstream calls, the plus calls, or something on one of the committees, I'd absolutely entertain that. Right now, I wouldn't, because being where I am in Georgia, I'm not good when it comes to computers and stuff, so I couldn't do any type of stuff online. But once I retire and I've just got 80% free time, I'd love to get deeper into Caller Lab. I love Caller Lab. Everybody I know for the most part is Caller Lab, and it's because of things like this, the Caller Lab conventions and what have you. And yeah. I would like. I'm going to stay in it, but I would like to get a little deeper involved, and I would really start looking much deeper and harder into it probably this time next year when I'm knocking on retirement's door.
Now, you just mentioned about not being very tech savvy, but I would disagree with that.
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I encounter that the thought of putting a video on YouTube, how do you do that? You know, and they would have no concept. But not only do you put this series on YouTube, but you also put it on Spotify and Amazon Music, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
Now that's some technical chops. Okay, so but I'm going to put you on the hot seat again.
Okay,
because Square Dance Tech, my self-imposed job is dragging square dancing into the 21st century. And I'm not going to go all down there because it's your show, not mine. We're not going to go down there. But you don't have a website. Was that a conscious decision not to have one?
No, it was not a conscious decision. I've just never thought about it. As a matter of fact, like most people, I had Facebook several years ago, and I just got so fed up with it, stuff that I would see and everything, so I got off of it. I took it off my phone, and 4 years ago, roughly, my wife actually came to me and she said, I think we were at a caller lab or something, and she was listening to people talk about, Facebook. I found this on Facebook, and then when I was on Facebook and we booked a dance, she said, you really need to get your Facebook back up again and just do one square dance, Charlie Petrea square dance caller on Facebook. And I said, okay. And so I did it, and I made her the administrator. I said, now I post a lot of stuff on there now, but starting out, I would send her videos from my dances. I'm like, here, post this, write this, whatever. And so she handles all that stuff, and every day she'll call and say, hey, you got a direct message. And I'll go on there because I don't even know how to find that half the time. And then I'll get it, or she'll tell me what it is, and I'll respond to it. So I've never considered it. But now in the handful of podcasts I've done so far with some of these folks and their websites, I was going to talk to you about that. But
wasn't an advertisement.
No, I understand. I understand that completely. But I've really, in the last few months, really started thinking about it because, I would just use Facebook and put stuff up, videos, what have you, and then a handful of people will text or send me a message, and so I thought, man, so I do need to explore getting a little more into the online part of it.
So in follow-up to that, how are you marketing yourself then? How are you getting the word out about you?
Nobody's ever told me anything about marketing. What I do is when I came up with when I did the Facebook, the square dance caller, I literally got that because I saw some other people that had so-and-so square dance caller. So I thought, okay, let me do that. And so then I would just start putting videos up of my dances and what have you. And so then when I came up with the podcast idea and thought, hey, let's do this, I just thought, well, I'll just put it on Facebook, and that way people can click on it and go watch the video on YouTube and all that. The downside is if you don't go to YouTube, you can't like it or stuff like that, Yeah. So there's a little bump in the road I got to figure out. I mean, I see how many people are looking at some of them, and but I would like to have a little bit more back and forth. Originally I said, hey, if you have any ideas who I should talk to, send me a message, call me, whatever. And I had a couple people say, hey, you should talk to this person. And I've contacted those folks. But so marketing, I don't know anything about marketing. I'm just,
let me give you the secret nobody knows about marketing. It's a try everything and the kitchen sink approach. It really is what it comes down to. Well, so now let's talk about this series.
Okay.
That we're here right here. And I screw up the name all the time. When I sent you the graphic, I had to reach you the square dance callers talking.
My wife caught that. I didn't. I was like, this is awesome. Look at this. So she goes, that's not the right name. And I was like, oh, I guess it's not.
So at the time that this probably will air, you'll have close to a dozen or so already in the bucket. And before we started rolling the cameras, you told me the genesis of this. So I want you to tell it again about how it all got started and everything. And what made you go, I'd like to do this?
As we were saying, since I get to travel around a little bit, I've got some callers that are friends of mine that don't get to travel. And so I tell them all these stories that I've come up on. And a while back, and I won't mention any names because I've not talked to the person about it, but I was at dinner with 3 callers, and I had met up with them on a weekend they were doing, and we were talking, and I was just sitting back because these were all seasoned callers that have called for a really long time. And so again, I'm just kind of starstruck and all watching them talk about calling, and and one of them said that they were bored one night doing a dance, and said they took their Bluetooth speakers and put them in their ears and continued to call the dance, listening to a basketball game. And I said, what did you say? And they said, yeah, I was bored, so I listened to a basketball game while I was calling. And I said, so while you're calling, there's something actively talking in your ear? He said, yeah, that's what it was. And I was just blown away, because I still struggle to find the corner on some nights and everything else. And, I sit there and try and figure out, how do I want to open? I can't say, four ladies chain them right back home again, And so I was blown away, and I thought, man, dancers and callers need to hear these stories. And I've spent a lot of time with callers outside of the calling world, whether it be at an after party or just, hey, let's go to dinner or something like that. And they tell some of these stories, and I just thought these are so good. And so I thought, how do I do this? And I just thought, let's just do a podcast, because, and I'd never done a Zoom call before. And so I came up with this, I came up with a thought. It's not my idea by any means, but I got on a Zoom call with one of my buddies, and I saw that you could, I'm sorry, wait a minute. You're talking about one of the worst nights I had. This is where the Zoom came out of. Hotlanta, again, I didn't realize how big a part of my calling life they were. Hotlanta asked me a while back to do a Zoom dance for them. And I was like, I've never done a Zoom call. I have it on my laptop because right when COVID years ago, I got Zoom on there as thinking I might need it for something, but I never used it. And so I said, this sounds great. So I got with some of the folks at Sarah Lynn, the lady who's over the Hotlanta stuff. We did a call one night, and I said, how does this sound? And she said, it sounds okay. And so I was just like, if I said Alaman left, can you understand me? And all, yeah. So we did the dance about 2 weeks later. Well, what I didn't take into account was they had 4 squares of people, and they set up the camera so that I could see the whole floor. But the problem is, as they started to dance, the square started moving out. So at one point, I could only see 2 couples in each square. So I had no idea who was with who, because I thought, I'll just try to cite this, and you can't read it. Also, with using my laptop, when I was doing a singing call, when I start to, really get loud, because I have a tendency to get loud, it was distorted. They couldn't understand what I was saying. Mm-hmm. And so it was rough. It was a rough night trying to get that. And it didn't work out well, and it's on me. I mean, I should have planned better. I should have had better equipment. So that was a bad night. So my best night was Hotlanta, and then my worst night might have been Hotlanta on a Zoom call.
It's the whole circle of
It is.
Yeah.
So standing in front of Hotlanta, perfect. Zoom call, not perfect. But that being said, so I realized that I could record when I was on Zoom. And so I called a buddy of mine, said, hey, get on a Zoom call with me. I want to see how this does. And just speaking, it works out pretty good.
Right.
And so then I thought, okay, let's do this. I can talk to callers all over the place. And so that's how that whole thing came about. And just wanting people, and one of the reasons I put in there is dancers. If I go to a club in Alabama, just outside of Georgia, that nobody knows me, I'll go in there. If they have a good time, great. If they just think, it's a caller from Georgia, whatever their thoughts are on me, if they think I'm the greatest person to ever step in that door, they only know me from the 2 hours I stood up there, and then at the end shook hands. Hey, glad you came out. Really appreciate you coming out to dance. They have no idea who I am, or what kind of, I don't want to say what kind of person I am, but so I thought, what, let some of these callers tell their stories. And so people will notice the first few that I did, it was really structured. What levels do you call it? Well, this, and this. But the ones that are coming out now, I thought, you know what? I started this to get more personal with people. So when you see Tony Oxendine, he's in a few weeks. I've already got him recorded. You know, I asked, hey, what's your favorite movie? Mm-hmm. And Jack Platty's had the greatest answer in the world, and I'm not going to let that out yet. It blew me. I mean, I agree. It's the greatest.
I actually know the answer to that one.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know, and it is. I agree, but it was just something I did not think he would pull like that quick. Huh. And Tony's too. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's about an ice skater and a hockey player. And I was like, Tony? What is this movie? And he says it. I can't remember it now. I haven't gone back, but so I started getting a little more personal. Hey, what's your favorite song? Not square dance. So what's your favorite movies and stuff like that. So,
well, as a suggestion, for future interviews and everything, and the way that I wrote the questions that are here, ask open-ended questions.
Okay.
Not ones with just a simple answer. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite color? But tell me about your worst calling experience. Yeah. And let you go.
Yeah. When I first started out, and I'll tell you, because it's already come out now. But another one is I ask everybody, give me a funny story about when you're calling. And that came out of, too, I knew the story from about 2-3 years ago about Justin getting duct taped to the bed because I heard it at a Caller Lab convention about 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm like, nobody knows this story except us, that we're here. And so when I had him on there, I didn't tell him ahead of time. And so I was like, I'm getting this story out of him, and he likes to tell it once he gets to it. Yeah. So, but just fun stuff like that.
At the Pittsburgh Caller Lab, they actually brought out a 6-foot picture of him.
Is that? I knew I'd seen the picture. I couldn't remember what it was.
I think I have a picture of it somewhere, but yeah.
Yep. I wish I would have had it so I could have put it in on the video.
Well, yeah. Let's. My next question is there. You kind of covered it because what I was thinking, I was going to ask you what your favorite interview was, but instead, what some of your favorite parts of the interviews? When a caller said something that was intriguing or that you didn't know. I mean, we talk about movies and everything with Jack and Tony and all. So, is there another instance of somebody said something so profound that you went, I never would have thought that?
And I'll say, and I'm not making this up because I don't have the best memory in the world, but my favorite part of Hunter Keller's video that's coming out this Friday was after I turned the record off and me and him just started telling stories. And I told him, I was like, this is what we were supposed to do on the video, buddy. I said, we're going to have to do another because he just starts cranking out these stories, with Tony and Justin and all that. I was like, this is what I wanted to hear. Oh, and he did tell some really good stories. It's a really good podcast. I enjoyed doing it. But he told me so much afterwards. I was like, dude, we got to do this all over again at some point. And so we will. But looking back on the first, I think the first 6 that are out now, and I'll say it, the one that really blew me away, surprising, was the one that just came out Friday, and that was Christy and Chuck. When she told the story about him proposing to her on stage. Yeah. They didn't tell me about that. They told me when she holds her hand up there, they didn't say that to me.
Yeah, so I saw that in your face.
That really caught me off guard. And I thought, well, that's awesome you did that on here. So that one caught me off guard. My very first one with Sean Butler, me and him were such good friends. I thought, man, when we got done, he was like, I said, man, I don't think I'm ever going to top that. I said, I enjoyed that so much. And I said, hey, I tell you what, every 25 episodes that I do, every 25 podcasts, I want you to come on and tell me what your favorite. Because if you ever look on YouTube, he puts long messages on there. So he is really into it. He is one of the callers out there that he works for UPS, and he doesn't get to travel, doesn't get to do anything right now. At some point here, he's been with them for 34 years. I'm like, when are you going to retire, dude? 34 years, Lord.
Wow.
So I was like, hey man, you need to get out there. And he said, well, one day I'll go out, because every time I book a dance in Georgia somewhere, I'm like, come with me. You can have half of what I'm getting paid. I don't care. You can have it all. I just want you to come with me, so people can see you. Like one day I'll come with you. And so really enjoyed the one with Sean. Oh gosh, Tony and Jack are really good. They're coming out pretty soon. Jet Roberts, he's got great stories. Jet's awesome.
Oh, I bet.
And I have a bad habit of this going back now that I think about it. The biggest fanboy moment ever was Jet Roberts last year at the Tennessee State Convention. I'd only heard of Jet Roberts. I'd watched YouTube videos of Jet Roberts. During the COVID times, I watched his videos where he'd sit and play guitar. And I'm like, who is this guy? And we went to Tennessee, and we went one night after one of the dances. Justin and Victoria, they all said, hey, and Scott, oh God, Gold Rush Records. I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry, Scott. Scott Brown.
Yeah.
Yes. They all said, actually Scott came and said, hey, there's a karaoke bar 1 block over. We went there last night. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I want to go. You kidding me? And I was standing somewhere, and Jet found out about it, and Jet said, hey, can you come pick me up at my hotel? And I'm like, you want me to pick you up? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm picking up Jet Roberts. And so I told my wife, I was like, look, you go to the bar. So I got all them to the karaoke bar. I went, drove 1 block over, picked up Jet, and drove him over. We went in there, and Jet actually got to do one karaoke, and he mentions that on his podcast. I was like, dude, how were you the only one? Because we all put in, but it was too late. Yeah. And he said $20 go a long way in a bar like this. But the whole time I was sitting there and we were drinking too much, and I was messing with Justin. I was like, I'm sitting next to Jet Roberts. This is Jet Roberts. So that was it. I was really, and again, then the next thing I know, Jet, has got his arm around me, and we're telling stories, and I'm like, dude, this guy's normal. But it's Jet Roberts.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Well, and that kind of leads to my next question or so about the interviews you've given, the full fanboy stuff. Is there who's your whale? Who's the one you want to catch? Who's the one you really want to talk to and do one of these with?
Of
course, it sounds like you're fearless. You'll just talk to any of them.
That's the thing. I didn't realize how accessible everybody was going to be, and I guess if I didn't know them kind of as well as I do, the Tony Oxendines of the world, I'd have been leery just to call. Yeah. And even when I started the idea, called my buddy Sean because I knew he would do it with me because we're friends, and then I called up Victoria and Justin and all these people that I know pretty well from the area, but I was still hesitant. I was like, Tony didn't want to do this. Tony really want to do this. And same with Ted and Scott Bennett. Scott Bennett was a phenomenal podcast. I love talking to that guy. He's so into the music.
And do you still call Scott Bubba now?
Yes, yeah. I saw him today. I was like, hey, Bubba. As soon as I got to see him. And, of course, he walks up and he goes, get out of the way, because he saw my wife standing behind me. And so I got to shake his hand after he hugged my wife.
That's proper protocol, man.
It is. But, yeah, he's Bubba finally. And so, I haven't set the time yet, but Vernon Jones, again, he was just a rumor that I'd heard about, and now I've got to see him several times at Carl Labs, but I was like, Vernon Jones and John Jones, and I'd like to talk to them. Deborah Carroll, John, I'd love to talk to all of them. I just haven't got around to contacting them. Vernon, I have. We have to set up something, but that was what I was hoping out of this weekend. Some of the folks that I only have said hello to. Right. Get their phone number and see who's willing to do it, and everybody has been. So yeah, I've got a lot of plans. I'm going to try and do it every Friday as long as I can.
And that, if you go on the road, that might be impractical sometimes.
It is, and that's why right now I've got 4 recorded and sitting on my hard drive.
Yeah.
It's set to release every Friday, and so I need to work on getting a few more. Because there's no way I could do it every single week to do that. So I knock out 2 or 3 in a night, and started out as a good idea, but I usually have a drink when I'm doing it, and then I did Jet Roberts from 6 to 7 one night, and I had Tony from 7 to 8. And I was like, I cannot drink during Jet because this is going to be a disaster. And so I didn't. But so it worked out okay.
You mentioned all the stories that Hunter was telling you after the cameras got turned off. You do have to do another one. Is that a possibility at some point? You go back and revisit?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I try and keep them around an hour, or somewhere in there. I mean, I don't have a time limit, but I just, when I'm calling, and so absolutely, I'll go back and especially if somebody has something go on or something, they have something big coming out they want to talk about. If I get the kind of followers where I start seeing several hundred folks watching these videos and things like that, and think, hey man, you want to talk about a cruise you got coming up or something, let's go. 30, 45 minutes, an hour, I don't care. So absolutely, I'll talk to some people over again. Will I have Johnny Carson and Don Rickles? Sure. I just hadn't figured out who Don Rickles is going to be yet.
Well, you may. What is it, in June or July? Is the executive committee is having a dance in Texas somewhere.
Okay.
And then in October, I believe, the same group are coming to Indiana. It's Ted, Tony, Buddy Weaver, Jack Platties, Justin Russell, and Teresa. The 6 of them are all going to be in those 2 locations or so. Would you ever consider altering your format for a little bit to get all 6 of them on?
No, I'd love to do that. Yeah, like I say,
and ask the stories of them, and let the other callers go. Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. Get a group together like that. I know next year they have Tony and Ted have a giant cruise with Justin Russell and Jet Roberts and all these folks.
There's like 15 callers on there and 1 queuer.
I've never figured out those numbers. When you see dances like that, it's like, we got 27 callers and a queuer. Okay.
It's Elaine Wintro. She's out of Ohio. It's Elaine Wintro, and she can hold her own.
I was fixing to say, man, got a lot of weight on her shoulders here. You want to throw in maybe a line dancer every now and then. But so and we're already booked, my wife, to go.
You guys are doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
We're going to dance, and and so I thought maybe I get some kind of recording on there, but that might be a disaster on the boat with all of us doing that. But something might come out of that.
Drinks will be imperative for that one,
Maybe if I can just get a camera off in the corner for a after party thing, I don't know. So that might be a bad idea too.
All right, well, at the point I want to thank you for being a guest on your own show, Charlie. Right. Congratulations. I hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Oh, my gosh.
Good.
Like I was telling you beforehand, when I started it, of course, being a caller that likes to listen to himself, after like my second podcast, the second one I recorded, I thought, man, I hope somebody wants to talk to me one day. I have all these answers and stuff I want to say. And and then when you contacted me, I was like, man, that's great. That's a good idea. And I love this setup where doing it in the same room with somebody. I thought about that when I came out here. I was like, maybe I could do a podcast. And, but do I put my laptop? But you've got the setup with this. It's fantastic. And
this will be the same setup I use to record a whole bunch of stuff for Caller Lab over the next few days or so.
Very
so,
nice.
And this is a lot of trial and error to get to this point too. So, is there? And you ask all the guests this too. So, is there anything else that I left out? Anything else you want to talk about?
Not that I know of. I just. I appreciate this, getting to do this. I hope that the people that are watching my podcast and listening to it, I originally was going to do an audio version and a video version. It just got to be, it's just another hour I didn't want to put into it on that. So I thought, if you don't want to watch it, just don't look at the screen. You can still listen to it. And so YouTube, Amazon, and Spotify were the easiest ones to upload everything to. So definitely, whenever you watch it, make sure you share it. When the ones that you put out and you share for me, I mean, they go through the roof a lot of times, and it really jumps up. And that's what I was hoping for, because I want all these callers to people who don't know them or people who've only heard of them to find out about it. More about me. I just, man, I love square dance calling, and all the people that I've met involved with it are just fantastic. And so, you know, if you ever thought about square dance calling, and I started asking too, does anybody have any advice for people who want to learn to square dance call? And I've got a few. Jack Platty's, when his comes out, that was the most instructional podcast I think that I've done. It's him talking to callers and thoughts and all that stuff. I really enjoyed that. When I got done with that, I was like, wow, that was really good, just on the instruction level and for callers to know about the profession. So,
yeah, Jack, I videoed an entire caller class that he did over 6 months, pre-pandemic. And I'm not a caller, and I can't sing, so I'll never be a caller. But the stuff that he taught was fascinating, just from the aspect of all the stuff that you guys do to put on a good show for us. That just blows me away. It just blows me away.
Yeah, he, I think he's 2 or 3 weeks from now it comes out, and his story, and I won't get into it because it is just phenomenal. That, you know, I started going to caller schools 3 years in. You know, I did one, and I would do 2 in a year, just depending on who was putting it on. I've been to all the big schools so far, but Jack's story, he taught himself, and it's just amazing to listen to. You know, and then Hunter Keller. I've been doing it since I was 12. Yeah. You know, doing my own dances when I was 14. I was like, what? and of course, he's already told it. But Justin, you know, he's teaching his first class and he was 16. I'm like, are you? Yeah. You're teaching adults square dance.
Yeah, I love that.
And then making fun of him when he was like, that's a bad idea.
I remember that.
Oh my gosh! But man, I appreciate it.
Well, sure,
it's been so much fun.
And normally, you know, the host of a podcast takes that, but no, I'm going to invite you to look at that camera and take this out of here. You know,
I want to thank everybody for listening, giving me the opportunity to talk, and Ray doing this for me. Square Dance Callers Talking is the podcast. Spotify, YouTube. Like, listen, subscribe, and follow all that stuff. I hope you get as much out of it as I do. And again, I want to thank Ray for this.
Absolutely, my friend.
Take care, yes, sir.
All right.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, dear God, please let it all have worked.